So, good day, everybody. We now start with our panel discussion about digital competency for Switzerland. And actually, it's a nice addition to what you heard already. And my name is Daniel Stoller-Schai. I'm your moderator for the next hour. To give you a little bit background of myself, I studied in education and information science at the University of Zurich and later on at the University of St. Gallen at the Institute of Information Science, not at the chair of Hubert Oesterle, but at the chair of Andrea Bach. And for the last 20 years, I worked in a couple of startups, but also larger enterprises, always in the field of digital learning, digital working. And since 1.5 years, I'm now self-employed with my own company. And today, in that panel, we discuss about the question of which digital competencies we need in our country, in our companies, organizations, schools, and who will or should be responsible to develop and educate those competencies. This will be a discussion in our panel. And I just took some screenshots from this morning. So the question is, which competencies do we need and on which level and who? And you see here a couple of screenshots in the upper left corner. That's a screenshot from Professor Joachim Buhmann from this morning. This is one aspect of digital competencies based on mathematical skills. In the lower left corner, you see a little bit of code from a Python programming environment. Also, that is considered as digital skills or digital competencies. Whereas in the upper right corner, that's the screen of a Tesla car. Also that needs a certain degree of digital competencies. And then in the lower right corner, there are some really basic digital skills which we all use for our daily life. So the question really tackles all those 4 fields, and I would assume even more. And to make everything a little bit more interactive, I would like to invite you to a little survey. You can go to menti.com, either through your browser or just take a picture with your smartphone and type in the number 8840992. And I change the screen to that little survey. The question is, from your personal perspective, from your personal or professional perspective, what do you think, what are the important future competencies? And you have the possibilities to add 3 terms. And I'm quite curious to see what pops up in a second here on my screen. So if you have a smartphone or a browser, just go to menti.com and type in 8840992. And then we will see what happens here on the screen. Okay. It seems to work. That's great. And if you see a term or a competency which you think you would support, that just type in exactly the same way, and then that term, that competency becomes bigger. And it will be quite interesting to see. We have a very technical savvy audience today, and I'm quite curious to see what you think are the future competencies. I still wait for a moment. It's quite an interesting picture. Okay, there are still people who vote. At the moment, we have 9 votes. We are much more in that conference, so I assume that still a couple of people are voting in the background. And we have a new leader, Abstract Thought. Okay, you can still vote, but I would like to do another experiment. So Arthur, you can open the microphones for everybody if that is possible. Because now I would like to pick out one or two of the words and discuss that with you directly over the audio. So for example, whoever wrote flexibility is now asked to maybe describe that a little bit in more detail over the audio. So who wrote flexibility? The mics should be open. You should be able to just speak.
I think they need to unmute them themselves.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, so you have to, that means that you have now the possibility to unmute yourself. So who wrote flexibility? Or if you have no answer, I pick out another word. Let's take navigating information. Who wrote navigating information? Could you give a little bit more explanation about that?
That was actually me. It just seems that we become an overflow of information.
Good.
And it takes a bit of a skill to kind of pick and choose which information you're going to process. Yeah. And because it's going to end up in the conclusion you draw and the opinions you create.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good, great. We have still the main competency seems to be abstract thought. So maybe there are more people who wrote that or who supported that term. So who wants to speak a little bit about that abstract thought?
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
I think that, so I go back to Arthur's comment. I think that navigating information is part of the third level of digital literacy, which is the possibility to use abstract thought to navigate different apps and use different systems and to conceptualize. So for me, it's an absolutely key function of advanced digital literacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot for that. What about collaboration? Who wrote about collaboration? Any other voices from the audience? So just unmute yourself and speak into the microphone. Collaboration. Of course, it's one of my key topics, which I think is very important, and I will speak about that in a minute. And let me try the last one. Digital design also seems to be quite prominent. Who wrote digital design? And can you explain that a little bit more? So whoever wrote that, please open the mic and speak into the microphone. Okay, I hope we don't have technical issues. It should be quite easy to open the mic.
In a webinar, the people who are not in the panel must request to talk. They can do this in the chat. I'll be gladly giving them the mic.
Okay. Good. In sake of time, I continue. I go back to my presentation, and I would like to give you a short introduction about the topic of digital competencies. There have been, I would say, hundreds of studies in the last 5 to 10 years, and I just pick out one of them. It's from McKinsey and the Stifterverband der Deutschen Wissenschaften, and you see they depicted the topic into a pyramid, where at the top we have the tech specialists who have to be focused on things like big data, UX design, robotic, and artificial intelligence. And the second level, the bottom, is divided in two parts. On the left side, we have digital key qualification on the left side and non-digital key qualification on the right side. So both is important when we speak about competencies, future competencies. but there are much more of this kind of studies. On the other side, we also see that we have a skill shortage in Switzerland, but also in other countries. And you see on the right side a short graphic about the skills shortage ranking for Switzerland in 2019, and you see which professions are missing the most. And all of those are also based on technical and digital competencies. But on the other hand, we also have a growing number of people with technical and digital skills which are unemployed. Because maybe they have the wrong tool set, maybe the wrong skill set, or maybe even the wrong mindset. And I assume that we also will speak about that group of employees in our panel discussion. And then it's also the questions how we measure competencies, how we can foster new competencies. And for that, we now open our panel. And I would like to introduce you to our panelists. And I start with the ladies. We have, first of all, Gaby Billing. She is head of product management and marketing at Klubschule Zürich. And I would like to ask you a personal question, Gaby. How do you invest in your personal digital skills?
Hello, everybody, and thank you for this question and thank you for being here. Me personally, I follow classes, and obviously as we also offer at Klubschule ICT classes, I'm in close contact with our teachers and our specialists, and then also by just using lots of different tools and always try to challenge myself. Okay, thanks a lot. Then as a second person, we have Danièle Gastle. She is a Senior Director Education and Talent for Digital Switzerland. And Danièle, I would like to ask you also a personal question. Which is the latest certificate which you gained in your professional career?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me, and I'm delighted to be here as well. I didn't get the certificate because I didn't pay for it, but the latest course that I followed was a course in gamification and game design, which I found extremely interesting because it's a way to get people to learn. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Great to have you on the board, Danièle. Number 3, Christian Hunziker. He is the head of SwissICT and also in the board of 3L, which he will explain a little bit later. And Christian, I would also ask you a personal question. What is your preferred learning method?
Hello to everybody. From my side also, many thanks for inviting me to this very interesting discussion here. My preferred learning is actually a combination of hands-on and reading books myself.
Okay, good, great. Thanks a lot. And last but not least, we have also Simon Moser with us. He works for FSAIE, that's the Federation of Swiss IT Experts. And my question to you, Simon, is what is one of your future learning goals? Maybe what do you want to achieve in the next 5 years?
Hi, everybody. I forgot to unmute, sorry.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on this panel. My personal goal for the next 5 years, I would like to know more and make an advanced education on distributed ledger technology.
Okay.
So blockchain and all the variants of it.
Okay. Thank you very much for those personal introductions. I can read in the chat that we had some audio issues. I hope that this is solved in the meantime. Okay, then I would like to continue. How you as participants can participate in that panel. So we invite you again to raise your questions in the query and answer part. But then maybe you can also post your thoughts and learnings on LinkedIn and Twitter, maybe even after the conference. And if you do so, please use the two hashtags Swiss Digital Summit and Swiss Informatics Society. Okay, and with that, we go into the first round of our panel. We would like to address and to discuss which digital competencies do we need in Switzerland, and we will hear that from 4 different perspectives. And I ask all the panelists to prepare one slide, just one slide, to give a short overview, and we start with you, Gaby.
Okay, thank you. As said before, I'm from representing Klubschule, and our claim is education for everybody. And in this perspective, I would like to talk about 15% of the Swiss population who are lacking basic skills in reading skills, writing skill, math, and ICT. Just for the province of Zürich, this means about 140,000 people who are not really able to cover or master everyday life. And they usually, they're working poor, they've had a poor experience at school, and it's very difficult to reach them and to take them along into our more and more digitalized society and workplaces. It's now a strong topic, also in the politics. It's high on the agenda on how to bring these people, take them along into digitalized society, bringing them with low threshold education up to a formal continued vocational education. So trying to close this gap. Why is it high on the agenda? Because the risk is very high that these people drop out of our society and will depend on social aid. From our point of view, it's key that we can set goals for these people, that they can see how they progress. And therefore, it would be very helpful to have a common framework for ICT skills. And now I'm talking, obviously, starting at the quite low level, using what we have seen from one of the first slides of Daniel, just using smartphone. Or if you imagine they work in the kitchen and they have to use a dishwasher, and all of a sudden this dishwasher, you cannot only push one push knob and then the machine will start. Nowadays they also have to tell how much the dishwasher, how many dishes are in there, how dirty they are, and in order to use less dishing powder, washing powder, things like that. So scale, the challenges are higher, and people who can barely read, they're really lost in situations like that. So that's the point, from the starting point, let's say, and from where we have to guide people into more and more, that they can really follow and still do their job, which used to be very easy, and now the challenges are increasingly more difficult for them. So this is what I would like to represent, and what I think is very important for our society, that we do not lose 15% of our population.
Okay, and what is the Klubschule Migros already providing in that area?
The starting point is really how to use a PC or how to use a mouse. That's where we start off, and then obviously from general competencies, we go on into more work-related competencies using applications, office design applications, web design, things like that, into coding. And also when we talk about coding, starting, you know, basic skills in coding up to Java coding.
Okay, thanks a lot for those for this first introduction. Now we continue to you, Danièle.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know Digital Switzerland, we're an association, a not-for-profit association. We've just merged with ICT-Switzerland, and we have several activities. One of them is Digital Days, which is coming up on the 1st to the 3rd of November with 300 different free activities, including learning labs. So for those of you who don't know and who might be interested, please do go onto the Digital Days website. From our perspective, the urgency in terms of digital competencies is that, as was mentioned earlier, there are already specialists missing, but by 2030, there'll be 120,000 roughly IT specialists missing. And that's just IT without counting the other areas of STEM, which means that it becomes terribly important to create a pipeline of talent, which starts in school actually, and it includes universities, and it includes but it also includes apprenticeships. And then when we're talking about digital skills, I think there are three large groups that we can talk about. So Gaby talked about really those who are not literate at all. My internet connection is unstable, so if it continues that way, I'll switch off my video. Not that I'm being antisocial, it's just so that you can hear me.
Okay.
But if we consider digital skills in terms of simple, intermediate, and advanced, each level needs to be addressed. So it's clear that if people are illiterate, you need to address illiteracy, but if you're in the school system, then presumably you're still learning the basic literary skills, so reading, writing, and arithmetic. But beyond school, you need to continue to develop that. And we've talked about adults in the workplace, but we haven't talked about retired citizens. So it has to be, in terms of leaving no one behind, it has to go from small children all the way to the third, even fourth age, because they need to be full citizens. And that's where we need to talk about digital competencies for all. So that's kind of my 1 second pitch.
Okay, and Danièle, does Digital Switzerland already has some kind of a framework or overview about which kind or what competencies are needed in the future?
So there are a lot of studies out there. So SBFI is looking at the basic skills, for example, or swissICT in French is looking at basic skills. SwissMem has also given a lot of thought to what the basic skills are. There doesn't seem to be a general consensus on what those might be, and it goes back to Gaby's point about basic literacy as well. I mean, if you've got 15% of the population that's illiterate, that's a problem. Yeah. And it goes back to what you mentioned, Daniel, which is tool set, skill set, and mind.
You're fading out a little bit, Danièle.
Sorry. So it also goes back to what you were saying about tool set, skill set, and mindset. That we can discuss further on, maybe.
Good. Okay, great. Thank you. Now let's continue to you, Christian.
Mm-hmm. So also a very short introduction for those who don't know SwissICT. We are not an industry association. We are actually a topic association, meaning that we combine individual members as much as classic users like Swiss Railways or banks and so forth, just as much as we also have classic ICT providers, consultancy, hardware providers, and so forth. That's why we are kind of a melting point for the different aspects and the different discussions. And what we work on regarding digital competencies is actually on two levels, or the different perspective. One is for the individuals, where we have the 3L. 3L comes from lifelong learning, joint venture that we have together with the SI, where our goal is actually to build that bridge between the reports that we have just seen that we are missing so many IT skills in the industry. And at the same time, we have a growing number of IT experts that are unemployed because they don't find a job. And what we have figured out is they don't find a job because they have difficulties to actually prove that they are really experts. And especially with the digitalization, where more and more companies need more and more IT experts, and people don't know, or very often people don't know really what is an IT expert. We thought that it makes sense to actually give kind of a neutral confirmation that a person that has probably not a classic IT career like apprenticeship and study and so forth, that these people also have very good and sound IT competencies that can be used for experts in different kind of projects and internal teams. We have a second activity, which is the Booster 50 Plus, which is a specific program for people that are over 50 and then have problem going back to the labor market. Very often it's not their mistake. It's simply because the company pushed them into technologies that simply went to dark room, I mean, in the sense that they're not used anymore and the lights is switched off. And so we help them reintegrate, and we work here closely with local work authorities to get extra funding and to bring those people back. And the third initiative is actually for companies where we do this digital excellence checkup. And we have seen that there are different competencies that are actually needed from the two different perspectives. For the companies, we have identified things like data understanding. So how do I work with all the massive data that is collected with IoTs and so forth. But it's also user experience and process automation. That many people actually don't really understand what it means. And for the individuals, what we have identified and what is actually part of getting this certificate for 3L is things like software development capabilities, modeling and project management methodologies, just as much as also database competencies and the standard ICT basics that you need to understand. What is an operating system? What is a programming language? What are algorithms? Which actually goes back to what Gaby Billing mentioned from the Klubschule.
No. Great, thanks a lot for that. And Simon, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Daniel. I am from the FSIE, and also at the same time, I'm in the board of the SI. We heard that the digital competencies they span really a wide range, from competences for everybody, for the people, competences for professionals, but not IT specialists, then IT specialists that have done an apprenticeship, and last but not least, also the IT specialists, and this is our focus, that have chosen to study IT, computer science, or business informatics at the university or University of Applied Sciences. So what our aim is, we are still in the startup phase. We have not yet launched marketing measures or anything. We are still in the preparation phase with FSIE. What we aim in the end is play a similar or likewise role that the FMH with their Facharzttitel play for the medicine professionals that did a study, for the IT professionals that did a study. And here what you see on the slide is like a prototypical professional development plan for those people. Of course, you know, doing a study is a great investment, and just immediately after you did your degree, typically a master degree, you are very well positioned in the market. You are on top of the knowledge and the competences. But as soon as it's 10 years gone from this degree, of course, you would have to do refreshers. And currently, it's just up to everybody, a bit left alone, to decide what to do and what not. And here, the FSIE is giving a systematic thing. So you have done it maybe at the age of 25, the degree, and normally you start into IT practice and do generic technical jobs. And at a certain time, you choose to be specialist more towards some technology or towards more business analysis or requirements engineering, towards maybe security, user experience. And before you can call yourself a specialist, we require you to have an advanced education, to do any of the already existing maybe certificates for UX or business analysis or whatever. And also at the same time start practicing in specialization. And typically at the age of 30, you are ready to fulfill the basic requirements to become an expert FSIE. And you have an initial certification procedure proof, and then you have the title, and as soon as you have it, then for your entire life, for this specialization, you have to have continuing education that updates, smaller investments for updating your knowledge in your specialized area, and to continue with practice. Also, we support part-time employment with our requirements, so we do not require a full-time practice in specialization. So it's possible to have 1 or 2 specializations at a time. With this systematic, we aim at making maybe the study, choosing computer science as a study, more attractive, and for sure enable the absolvents of the studies to maintain their, I say, advantage over other IT professionals until their career end, until their retirement. So that's the goal.
Thank you, Simon. And I've seen that in the chat we have a question from Danièle. You can address that, I guess, directly to sure. Simon, or maybe also the other panelists.
How do people become familiar with these courses? Can older people also specialize, or is limited to 13 years old? Also, okay. The first question is, how do people become familiar with these courses? We aim to target mainly the study absolvents, and as soon as we launch our marketing, we will get in contact with every University of Applied Sciences, but also Höhere Fachschule Technik at some parts, and also contact alumni, and also via SI, Swiss Informatics, to address the people and to publish it. Currently, it will be individual, it will be presentations at absolvents, celebrations, events, and everything like that. But also on the web, of course, we are present. But we are not marketing people. I think we need some support at some end. Currently, we are just all absolvents of IT studies that have this idea of experts for experts, coming up with a systematic plan. And then your second question is, can older people also specialize? Limited to certain years? No. Of course, it's not a limit to be, or it's just prototypical that you, at the age of 30, you will make this certification. But of course, you can be 50 years old. It's still possible, especially when we are now in the process of being set up and it's new. Then we have lots of professionals having a tertiary IT, computer science education that are 40, 50 or so, but they are very welcome also to join in.
So I asked the question because we know that the unemployment pyramid is heavier right now with the youngsters, so it's logical that you're taking students, but it's also quite heavy in the after 50s. And if you can offer the after 50s some kind of benefit, which this program I think would offer, then it becomes interesting. But if they don't have access to it, then it's kind of unfair. I guess that's where I was coming from.
No, that's just prototypical, but of course we don't have any age limitation to do it.
Thank you.
Okay. Now to conclude this first round about the competencies, I also would like to show you an overview which we mapped out in our special interest group, Digital Competencies. The special interest group, Digital Competency, has been founded some months ago. It's a special interest group from the Swiss Informatics Association. And it's not yet a framework. It's a first attempt to go in that direction. Also to combine the different maybe approaches which we heard now from the panelists. And you see on the left side, we have 3 levels. Similar to what you, Gaby, mentioned, basic, advanced, and expert. Also a little bit related to the language education. So we also try to make a differentiation between A1, A2, and so on. And then you see all the different competencies, starting with the very basic ones, office tools, going to the right side where we end up with data science. And you see what kind of examples we already put in this first attempt framework. And we will work on that and try to build up a rather sophisticated set of competencies, digital competencies, which can be used on those 3 levels. So that's a final part for this first round. And now I would like to open the discussion again to our audience. If you have any questions, just let us know either in the query and answer chat, or you can also request for the microphone over the chat. And while waiting on that, I ask you, Gaby, you now have heard all those different approaches. Do you see any possibilities for collaboration for Klubschule Migros with one or several of those approaches?
Yes, I was very happy to hear that everybody's working in the same directions. Obviously, the levels of the target groups are different, but it seems like they're linking to each other. I guess, especially with Danièle, Digital Switzerland, I think there's a lot of touching points, and I would be very interested to continue the discussion with Danièle. And then obviously, if we move on into the vocational area and the working place area, there are lots of touching points with swissICT. And then I guess with the programs Simon Moser was representing, that's the higher level, as Klubschule stands for, covers everything until to applied University of Applied Science. So this is the spectrum we're covering. And then I'm very happy to see this chart, which is reminding myself very much of the language framework, which is very, very helpful when we look at people studying a language, they see where they're progressing and that they're moving on, and especially if there are abstract topics, then it's very helpful to have a framework within which people can progress.
Okay, thanks for that, Gaby. I've seen that we have a question in the Q&A area. Michel Glaubauf, if you have a possibility to open your mic, you can directly speak into the mic. It's a little bit more personal. If not, I just read it, the question.
I put out my mic so you can hear me, I suppose. So my question is, when I worked in industry, in software industry, I had many colleagues who came from very different areas, who had no formal studies in computer science or business informatics. I was the only one, in fact, with business informatics. And with this permanent problem of having 120,000 or so people lacking in the industry, I think we have to onboard these people, and these people are already working somewhere in a field that is related to business informatics or informatics, but they have no formation. So therefore, we don't consider them to be really relevant to our field, but they are. I think we can't afford to leave them out.
I think that,
yeah,
that's exactly the aim of our 3L initiative, because exactly we integrate not only the classic IT career, but also we evaluate and accept also different kind of learning paths and getting into the IT industry, because it's exactly as you've mentioned, many people actually that are IT experts today did not do a classic IT education. And that's why we specifically with 3L actually aim to give exactly those people that don't have the classic IT career the possibility to prove themselves as IT experts, or the IT, not experts in the sense as FSIE is talking about, but really IT specialists. And that's exactly what the aim is for, because as I mentioned, there's so many companies now looking for IT people, and people that haven't been recruiting IT experts in the past, it's sometimes difficult to figure out. Is not somebody that does that did a machine engineering education, but a lot of deep dive, hands-on with programming, better than somebody that actually did an IT expertise, IT core education, but actually did something completely else for the last few years. And that's why we try to aim to help exactly with this certification that consists of a CV analysis with the educations that you did and the jobs that you were doing, as much as the expertise and the knowledge that you have at hand when you do the multiple choice test.
Yep. Daniel?
Can I add maybe something?
Oh, sorry, there is an answer from Daniel.
Market particularly.
Yeah.
Sorry? It's okay.
I've seen
Part
that
of the issue is that, yeah. Part of the issue is that people require certification and employers require certification. And I think that employers need to move beyond certification to skills-based and competency-based acceptance. And AI is looking much more closely at that. Employers using AI to recruit are looking much more closely at skills and competency matching than at qualification. So I think it has to work both ways. I think you need the qualification, but you also need to acknowledge that there are skills and competencies. And by acknowledging that, you allow people to enter the job market more easily.
If I may add something here, I'm actually used to be an AI expert some years ago. I actually studied maths with Kalman filters, if that talks to you. The problem with AI first has to learn to be actually knowledgeable. And that's the problem, because we don't have the real learning material to actually train those AI networks. And that's why we think we have to go ahead with a, as I call it, basic certification. What we do, it's certification in the sense of giving a proof, yes, that person actually has enough knowledge. And I think that's something that we can build upon, and then actually use as a second step AI to learn from it. And that perhaps where I'm also a little bit skeptical about AI, there are so many proofs out there that unfortunately, specifically in the recruitment process, that AI has some prejudice built into it, like that for specifically women are normally not, with AI algorithms, evaluate at the same level of technical expertise as men. And that's why I'm a little bit skeptical of introducing AI right now already for IT experts.
Okay. We also have a comment from Martin Glintz about education and certification. And maybe Martin, you can open your mic. So you can try to open your mic and just make your comment over the mic. That seems not to be possible at the moment for whatever reason.
Maybe Daniel, hello.
Yep.
Could I come back to Michel's question and make a small addition to what Christian Hunziker said from 3L? Yep. Actually, this is an example where we really go hand in hand with 3L, or plan to go hand in hand. We're still starting up. We consider having the 3L certificate as an alternative to the basic requirement of having competences, IT competences at the tertiary level. So we would acknowledge the 3L also as an alternative entry into our FSIE IT expert program. Mm-hmm. It's not yet really completely clarified how exactly it would work, but we are in contact there.
Yeah. Okay, great. So time is flying, and I would like also to tackle the second question. So just let me go to the next slide. So we would like to address briefly the question, how can we develop digital competencies in companies and educational institutions? So who is responsible for that? And just show you the next slide. So the question is that within the responsibility just of the Swiss education systems, or there are also many other players like companies, further education providers, for example, such as Klubschule Migros? Is that a task of individuals or others? So what's your opinion about that? And maybe we can start with you, Danièle. You have to unmute. Oh.
All of the above and more besides. So I think that it's the role of everyone if we're going to be an inclusive society. It's also the role of parents in terms of providing children with leisure activities that stimulate curiosity and interest in ICT, among other things. So it's a collective effort. I really do believe so.
What I'm especially interested in is about the self-directed, self-learning competencies of individuals. What do you think? How can we foster this competency?
I think that it's fostered in early years, and it's fostered through play and through encouraging curiosity and trial and failure, and through constructive play and guided play. In later years, I think that what we're seeing, so for example, what I've heard from some of the school teachers is that kids can swipe on their phones, no problem. But you ask them actually to attach a document and put it into an email, that's not possible. But if they're not trying and failing, then they're not going to get there. So it has to be guided and it has to be trial and failure. I don't know if that answers your question, but. Yep.
Okay. And Gaby, where do you see the responsibilities to build up all those competencies?
Yeah, I also think it's all of them on the slide, and then we shouldn't underestimate the possibilities of the politics. And where I see a weak point right now, if you look at lifelong learning, which will be a key requirement in the future, then we'll see that the government is only supporting formal education and is not giving any support to non-formal in-between learnings or studies or classes. And this can be a problem if you look at the finances of people between 30 and 50, having families, having jobs, being under a lot of pressure. And from what I've heard from the national institutions, also provincial institutions, there are no plans at this stage to give any financial support. If you're thinking or anticipating following an informal education by non-formal, I mean like Fachausweis or CIS. Okay.
And Simon, what's your opinion on that topic, on that question?
I think with respect to FSIE, for those IT professionals like me, there is actually currently a lack of short courses that are just focused on people that already are specialists and have the level. Normally it's just courses that are starting then from ground zero and everything, and it could be much more interesting for certain people just to do the update, the difference. So, and I think this would be for the further education providers a good opportunity to offer those specialist courses, updates, refreshes. And what I experience myself also, that in the companies you have certainly very interesting company further education courses, 1-day seminars, 2-day seminars, And from FSIA, we have a system also to accredit them and acknowledge them as continuing education.
Okay, thanks. And your opinion, Christian?
I think it's a classic chicken and egg problem. On one hand, if the individual is not willing to actually invest time and also effort and motivation into learning, you won't move people ahead. At the same time, we also have to motivate companies to actually support this kind of learnings. I've come not across many companies that actually have in their organization communicated explicitly to employees like, you have something like 5,000 or 10,000 Swiss francs available per year for trainings. If you invested into a CIS formal training, if you invested in self-learning tools and some things like this. And that's, I think, what needs to be done, that companies actively communicate that they have budgets available for learnings and that they motivate and perhaps even measure people that they really do the learnings. Nobody will move ahead. And at the same time, if we do this, actually this will motivate people to say, okay, I'll invest perhaps some part of my private time, I'll do special courses, and that way actually I stay up to date with the competencies that I need, and this way actually helps the companies to have competent people and actually be competitive in the market.
Okay, great. I'm cautious about the time, but I've seen in the chat that now Martin Glintz is available as a guest. So maybe, Martin, you can come back to your comment over the mic.
Yeah, let me try. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Well, with respect to education, I think we have to consider two things. On the one hand side, we have our normal educational institutions like universities. There I see the need that we offer more things like CASs, Certificates of Advanced Studies, that help professionals to keep up to date. And on the other hand, educating individuals, there are, well, programs offered in conjunction with professional certification, which is going beyond what 3L and FSIE are doing. So for example, the certified professional for testing or for requirements engineering. And there will also be a professional for digital design in the future, where non-profit bodies provide, say, syllabi and also certification examinations where people can get the skills that they actually need. So professionals who need to somehow get upskilled for new situations. So particularly in digital design, this is, say, the product, the technical design of digital systems. I see a rather big need in the future years that we educate professionals there. We also see a need in usability, for example, and obviously my field requirements.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Our hour is already over, so I skip the final slides, and I just want to make a short hint to our special interest group, digital competencies. We have seen it's a broad topic, and we could, I assume, continue our discussions for hours. So whenever you are interested to continue that discussion, you can also join our special interest group, digital competencies. And I would like to thank you, our panelists. Normally I would now hand over some flowers or a bottle of champagne, but I can't because we do that virtually. But at least I can send you some virtual flowers. And I thank you very much for your contributions, and all the best. And maybe we can speak further about that topic in another occasion. Thank you. And with that, back to you, Arthur.
Thanks to you, Daniel.
I'm back. Thank you, Daniel. Unfortunately, I missed your panel, which would have interested me very much because we are also engaged very much in this topic of digital skills. But I trust that it was a very interesting panel with a lot of views. We continue at 3:15 with the third keynote of today by Haya Schulman and seeing you then in about 10 minutes from now.
Thank you, Reinhard, and have a good break.